The losing streak continued in Buffalo. And are the Panthers snake bitten? The advanced numbers say yes.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Monday, October 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from Hockey News. You can follow me on X at Monoman12. Follow the show anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Shout out to everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. You can do that all on FanDuel. So, Panther fans, grateful to be back here once again on another edition of the show to discuss everything in the world of the Florida Panthers. Although the Panthers are on a 4-game losing streak right now, there's still a lot of hockey left to play. So today we are going to discuss a little bit of Saturday's game against the Buffalo Sabres. We're going to discuss as well if the Panthers are in fact snake bitten and how badly are they snake bitten. And we're going to discuss more about the power play and the amount of adjustments that we saw, especially on Saturday afternoon in Buffalo. And then we will preview Tuesday night's matchup against the Boston Bruins, as we will not be having a show on Tuesday preparing for that matchup. So we will be discussing it on today's edition of the show. So apologies, guys, if my voice does sound a little bit shot because I'm a little bit under the weather. I currently have a cough drop as I'm speaking into this microphone, trying to at least make this sound a little bit of more quality here on a Monday late morning here, as it is 10:27 a.m. here. But the Panthers going into Buffalo, like I said, after Thursday night's game against the New Jersey Devils for the Panthers, is that once again that the Panthers are going to get a team's best, and the fact that coming into this matchup, the fact that there's a lot of noise around the Buffalo Sabres as well about it being late early, that they were going to come out guns blazing, motivated, but it was actually the Panthers that were that early on, and especially getting a power play early on within 9 seconds of the first period. And the fact that the Panthers are not able to capitalize there. I mean, you get 4 power play opportunities in the first period and not being able to score. And in both times in the intermissions going into the second period and the third, you had time on the power play to carry over, talk to everybody in the locker room, and to possibly get a score on. The Panthers were unable to do so, and the Panthers making so many multiple adjustments. I mean, you look in this game that you start with power play 2 at times, that even for the power play 1 that started, you're switching to blue liners in Seth Jones on one unit and Jeff Petrie on the others, flipping them, and then Sam Reinhart double shifting on the power play towards the end of the game as well. So the Panthers are trying everything on that part, but it's more than just the power play. It's the 5-on-5 scoring as well. The Panthers are currently 30th in the NHL at goals for per game. So it's kind of tough right now for the Panthers, and just their inability to get to the net front, those second chance opportunities, and the fact that the defense is clearing the puck out of the dirty areas as well. And I mean, yeah, the Panthers have gone up against very experienced goaltenders throughout this road trip as well. That's another thing, that those goaltenders that the Panthers are facing are not phased by all of this as well. You're talking Cam Talbot, Jake Allen, Alex Lyon, who the Panthers, we saw how great he was, especially in that 6-1-1 stretch. I mean, the broadcast pulled up the stats from when the Panthers made the 2023 Stanley Cup final in that 6-1-1 stretch, having those under 2 goals a game and a .940 save percentage. I mean, we've seen this with Alex Lyon being such a high floor player. Obviously, it didn't work out in Detroit and getting the starts here in Buffalo, although he is not projected as the number 1 guy for the rest of the season. That's saved for Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who's currently hurt. He's definitely one of those high floor goaltenders out there in the NHL, and congratulations for him on getting another one-way deal. And his play with the Panthers has absolutely earned it. But you look at the Panthers, and just whenever it comes to how special teams went on Saturday, it was when it rained, it poured for them, because you're thinking about the amount of zone time that the Panthers were able to have in on special teams. 7 power play opportunities, and you have a hard time scoring, while the Buffalo Sabres, in both of their power play goals, they score less than 30 seconds in both of them. And that's because of their ability to get to the net front, with Josh Doan scoring both of them. One redirected, and then one of them on a nice little pass from the right circle to the blue paint, and he's able to get through. But that's also because of the defensive coverage for the Panthers, especially on the one that was set up near the blue paint. You had 3 forwards behind the goal line, which created an open opportunity where Sergei Bobrovsky was not able to stop that goal. And then you're trying to do a little too much on the Owen Power goal, where Forsling pinches in the neutral zone, Aaron Ekblad has to recover, and then you have to depend on Anton Lundell to back check on a defenseman who's activating into play in Owen Power, which Owen Power, Mackie Samoskiewicz's teammate from the University of Michigan, scoring on that one. But it was just a big chain reaction of so many different things, that because of one part of the game and one unit, that you have to overthink in different parts. And I mean, it's a whole collective effort for this Florida Panthers team when it comes to just overall 5-on-5 play, and then you're passing a little bit too much, or not boxing out in the dirty areas in order to outmuscle the opposition, which that's for the Panthers, they're having a really, really hard time doing. And it's a tale of 2 different teams from home and road, because although the Panthers didn't really get outshot, they outshot the Buffalo Sabres by 15 shots of them actually on the power play. Which you think of on the first power play, you get 4 shots on goal, and then the very next one you get 0. But all with the cumulative of those 7 opportunities, you get 15. You should be able to at least score 1 when you're on the power play. 5-on-4, more bodies, more opportunities to win board battles, more opportunities to draw them out of their position and to get those higher percentage shots. That's just the most frustrating thing about all of this. And to think that Buffalo gave you an opportunity to over and over again. That I know we saved the moment where we knew the game was won or lost on the weekday shows whenever we do post games, but it was truly early where I really thought that the Panthers really lost this, because you're thinking of these 4 opportunities that the Panthers could have capitalized. And I'm not going to blame afternoon games for the Panthers. Every team has to go through them, but the fact that you're not able to carry that momentum from one period to the next, and that for me, for the Panthers, was a point in the game where I'm just thinking, man, they're not going to find a way to score on this team, aren't they? So that's just the head scratching part. And I get it. You're missing a lot of key pieces as well in your lineup, but like this team is just this team is right now, they're not the Stanley Cup champions of the back-to-back years, and you have to wonder if this is just a little dry spell in the beginning of the season, or if this is just who the team is going to be, because we've seen so many different line changes early, with especially last game with Eetu Luostarinen being at third line center. This one, they went back to the whole Lundell, Marchand, Luostarinen line. They kept Evan Rodriguez on that third line center with Mackie Samoskiewicz's and Jesper Boquist. So they kind of went back to what they had at the beginning of the season, from what was getting them the results that they were getting. I know there's a little bit of, now it took a little bit of more of a downward spiral with Dmitry Kulikov's injury now, and Paul Maurice even said this after the game. The injuries that are on the team, they're not coming back. This is the team that they have. So they have to go through the growth and the pain here early on. And maybe it's just an early season slump for the Panthers. Who knows? But that for them, that is something that they are going to have to figure out. This is what life is right now for the Florida Panthers in 25-26. And it's a lot of pain, but Those are the hands, those are the cards that the Panthers have to deal with. Those are the ones that they've been handed. So how do they adjust from here? But the advanced numbers might have something to say about the Panthers and whether it is actually a lack of luck for them, and what is the ultimate solution for the Panthers on special teams. We're going to get into that and more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. And let's be honest, most of us can't even name all of our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, saving, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started with Monarch. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire finance life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. And it helps me organize my accounts. It makes me see which subscriptions I am still paying for, even if I am not using them, and it gets a better handle on my investments without ever touching a spreadsheet. Monarch's visual data boards and smart tools make it so much easier to understand where my money is going and how to make it work harder for me. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarch.com. Use code LOCKEDONHL for half off of your first year. Segment number 2 here on this Monday, October 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Monday, as the Panthers are 3-4-0 through 7 games of the season. And I'm going to do a quick calculation. The 7 games through out of an 82-game season. Right now, we are at the 9% mark of the season for the Panthers. And just I looked at the standings for the first time this season after the Panthers lost on Saturday, and just outside of the second wild card spot, minus 5 goal differential. But as we saw in those first 2 games of the road trip in Philadelphia and in Detroit, those 4 empty net goals made those games not more lopsided than it actually was. So that's also the fact that the Panthers, throughout the majority of this road trip, have been right there and just 1 goal away. Tells me once again that this team is once again one that is truly a high floor team. And also it says that in the analytical numbers as well. And the one that stands out for me, this was shared by Jay Fresh Hockey and then retweeted by Jameson Olive of FloridaPanthers.com, was the goals scored above expected as of October 19th. And if you're on the YouTube page here, you will see that I'm pulling this up right now from the tweets from Jay Fresh Hockey, which right now the Panthers are ranked 32nd in the NHL in goals scored above expected at minus 6.8 on the season. And this is in all situations, not just 5-on-5. When you think of the Panthers and still their aggressive forechecking play and suffocating in the neutral zone with speed, although that wasn't really the case on Saturday, they are getting the possession, which right now the Panthers are still outshooting their opposition by an average of 3 shots per game. Although it's flipped, especially in the early parts of this road trip, to 10 less shots that the Panthers are actually getting. So and the fact is, the Panthers dump and chase game whenever they are trying to do it, especially flipping it. The defenseman for the Panthers opposition is getting there first, and they're also getting the puck support necessary to get that first breakout pass out or flip out of the zone. That's happening quite often for the Panthers, and what's been going on early on in this very, very young season. So that's that this tells me that the Panthers are set to at least get they're not getting the breaks that they need, but this tells me that the Panthers are going to possibly bounce back, and it'll actually result in the puck finding the back of the net, at least from this chart that is shared by Jay Fresh Hockey. And like I mentioned in segment number one, this coaching group tried everything on the power play on Saturday. Like I mentioned, Sam Reinhart is playing kind of like the Matthew Tkachuk role, not necessarily the setup behind the goal line, but as far as double shifting on the power play, because that is your best goal scorer. Like Sam Reinhart is basically having to do everything for the Panthers right now, but he might have to do a little bit more, in my opinion, which is a lot to ask. And what I mean by more is what is something that I'm about to propose that I would like to see. So right now, the forward lines for the Panthers, like I mentioned, the third line that was outstanding for the Panthers last year in Lundell, Marchand, Luosterainen, that's your top line right now. And we started the shift of the minutes for that line for Lundell, Marchand, and Luosterainen, especially Anton Lundell getting more minutes over Sam Bennett, mostly in that New Jersey game, where you're thinking that most of the time that wasn't really necessarily mostly the switch. That power play two, with Jeff Petrie running the blue line, was really starting on the power play, which we saw that mostly on. We saw it more on Saturday than we did on Thursday. We saw it at least once or twice on Thursday, but we saw it almost every single time on Saturday, where it was the Petrie led blue line for the power play for the Panthers getting on the ice first and getting a majority of that, because that power play one for the Panthers that is supposed to be your uh the majority of your goal scorers and the majority of the guys who are supposed to keep the puck in the opposition's end. They're still not producing for the Panthers. But one proposition that I do have, if I'm looking at the lines right now, you're not going to touch that fourth line. I don't think that Luke Cunnin, Gadjevich, or Greer are going to lift any floors in the top nine. But I'm thinking that because I don't really believe that Evan Rodriguez could mostly drive a whole line by himself, I think that you need to consider putting Jesper Boquist back on that second line with Sam Bennett and Carter Verhaeghe, because I remember there was a point last year where Jesper Boquist did strive quite a bit in in his role right before he got that contract extension. I know he went through a little bit of a drought after he got extended, but that is something that I would like to see. And also shift Sam Reinhart to not necessarily third line center. This that could be your top line, that could be your second line, and put him with Mackie Samoskevich and Evan Rodriguez. That gives an opportunity for Sam Reinhart to still have shooters on his wings, and Evan Rodriguez, who also has a little bit of a speed factor to him and a great puck handler. You have that in Reinhart and Rodriguez, and Samoskevich can shoot the puck from anywhere. Also, with the power play, not to mention, they're not using Sam Reinhart as much on the blue line as much as I thought they would. So I want them to use him there. There was a point on the power play where I was seeing Carter Verhaeghe and Seth Jones when they were together being the ones protecting on the blue line, but because you don't have someone like Matthew Tkachuk behind the goal line to set up Sam Reinhart in the bumper, Sam Reinhart is mostly not useless there, but he's not as effective. And I did see a little bit more of Anton Lundell being the guy to protect the half walls there. I do believe that it's either him there or either him parked at the net front, because of the fact that his hand-eye coordination is outstanding when it comes to redirecting, and also Mackie Samoskevich, if I remember correctly, had an outstanding chance on the power play as well for a net front redirection, but that was stopped by Alex Lyon on Saturday. So there's a lot of things that this team still needs to try to experiment, which I'm not mad about these changes. And when you're going through the goal scoring drought and your goaltending is the least of the problems for this team, you gotta try something, and you are more willing to tinker with the forward lines than you are willing to do for the defense, which I'm happy that the Panthers are still attempting to do that, to at least try to get something to work. But right now it's according to the model that Jay Fresh has. The Panthers are looking to finally break through, and it's gonna be tough, but What if this is just a streak for a skid, excuse me, for the Panthers that is happening earlier than expected? Usually this happens on their road trip whenever they go to Vancouver, Calgary, usually that Western Canadian trip, but maybe it's saved for the early part of the season. And right now the Panthers aren't controlling the matchups because of the fact that they don't have last change, but eventually you got to find some wins on the road, and you got to find a way to play in these tough environments, which this group has done multiple times before. I mean, 3 out of their 4 series that they won last year were on the road the first 3 rounds before finally winning the Stanley Cup at home in 2025. So they're not phased by this. It's just whenever you're not getting the goals on the board, you may be gripping your sticks a little too tightly, and we see that happen over and over again for the Panthers, as far as not making life uncomfortable for in the example of Alex Lyon on Saturday and the rest of the goaltenders that they've faced during this road trip. So hopefully the Panthers do turn that around on Tuesday night in Boston. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we are going to preview Tuesday night's game for the Florida Panthers, as they will be facing off against the Boston Bruins on Tuesday night from the TD Garden. We're going to discuss that all next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And the NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can just bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Although there aren't any games that the Miami Dolphins should be favored going forward, especially next week when they visit the Atlanta Falcons at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, if you want to win big and go for the upset, you can do that all on FanDuel, and it makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today to get started. Segment number 3 here on this Monday, October 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And the Panthers will be visiting the Boston Bruins on Tuesday night in Boston for Brad Marchand's return to the TD Gardens for the first time since he got traded. And by the way, Brad Marchand got fined $5,000 for his actions, the unsportsmanlike conduct against Rasmus Dahlin. I don't agree that Brad Marchand should have been the one going to the box after Rasmus Dahlin cross-checked him in the back toward the near side half wall, and then Brad Marchand just had enough. But then the comedy there of him ripping the strap off of the helmet and then throwing it back on the ice. Hey, if Brad Marchand's not on your team, you don't love him and you hate the kind of stuff that he does. But that's just another message of, hey, don't mess with him. But at the same time, maybe it was away from the puck, so chances are the referees weren't looking in that direction for the call, and maybe that's why it was missed. But also, you try to at least keep the calls even, and with the Sabres having 4 penalties versus the Panthers 7 throughout the game, maybe that's why they didn't make the initial call on Brad Marchand. And you see board battles all the time where guys are going towards the puck and then they're literally cross-checking each other, and those don't get called. So the cross-checks are actually it's kind of like holding in football. Cross-checks are probably the most missed calls that we see in hockey throughout the entirety of the sport. If that's one thing that gets missed the most. But if you called cross-checking every single time, you'd see at least 10 penalties a game. It's just like making so many different holding calls. You don't want so many. I'm not saying that one is ticky tack, but man, Brad Marchand did not see that one coming at all, and you could see why Brad Marchand got frustrated. But the Panthers will be visiting the TD Garden on Tuesday night, 7:30 on ESPN. We don't know who the broadcast team is currently for that game that will be going on in Boston. but it's going to be a very emotional night. And Brad Marchand did speak after the game that it's more of the guys that he spent off the ice than it was on the ice, and how special it was for his time there in Boston. I mean, you're talking 10 plus years in the organization, won a Stanley Cup in only his second year with the franchise, and very young in his 20s getting there, and not becoming a dad just yet there when he won the Stanley Cup. And then all those years of multiple playoff runs, including the President's Trophy season before eventually losing to the Panthers, which you think that once again, if Sergei Bobrovsky doesn't stop that breakaway opportunity from Brad Marchand in Game 5, you're talking for the Florida Panthers, like, where are they if Sergei Bobrovsky doesn't make that stop? Does Brad Marchand even get traded to the Florida Panthers to begin with? Do they go on a run the very next year? Because of course, had Brad Marchand scored in Game 5, the Bruins would have won 4-1, and Paul Maurice's seat would have been hot going into the very next season. And I was on that. For me, I was thinking, okay, he's going to get at least one full year of forgiveness, at least for me, and then his seat will really be hot. But he saved his job then, and he definitely saved his job after winning the Stanley Cup. And hey, he earned a multi-year extension after that. And Paul Maurice did also say after the game in Buffalo that this is kind of what you need. The 2 days off are kind of necessary to get away from the ice a little bit on the Sunday, which the team is already in Boston. They're going to practice today and get back on the ice. So get away a little bit. Hopefully the Panthers took an opportunity to eat some buffalo wings while they had the rest of their day after their matinee matchup, and it's back to the drawing board. It's back to being on the ice and together, bonding on the road, which we saw how crucial that was for this Panthers team. And hopefully it results in a win to stop some of the bleeding on this road trip. So Panthers and the Bruins, they're both 3-4-0. Both of them are actually on 4-game losing streaks, funny enough, which Boston started with a back-to-back win on Wednesday and Thursday in Washington and against Chicago, beat Buffalo, but then they haven't won a game since their third game of the season. Both started 3-0-0. So it's crazy the kind of matchup that the Panthers are going into this one. And they got a little bit of a mountain time road trip out of the way to already start the year, going to Vegas, Colorado, and then Utah. But the Vegas game wasn't as close as the final score indicated. They were down as much as 6-3 before scoring 2 goals in the third period. Did put a little bit of pressure on Vegas, but that game was never in doubt, in my opinion. And then losing to the Colorado Avalanche, getting blown out. Nathan MacKinnon scored 2 goals, and then losing to the Utah Mammoth on Sunday by a goal. But Dave Pastrnak hadn't scored in the early part of the season. He was hot during that road trip. That's at least a bright spot for the Boston Bruins there. But the Boston Bruins is once again a team that I describe as a very high floor team. Not enough to contend for the Stanley Cup, but not bad enough to get a number 1 overall pick, which they got the number 8 overall pick last year. They drafted James Higgins out of Boston College, which James Higgins is also a lacrosse player. He's also and it's also a college that is very close in proximity. So the Boston Bruins really had a big eye on him. But Higgins was projected as a number 1 prospect just about this time a year ago, but dropped significantly, which now in this draft, Matthew Schaefer, who plays for the New York Islanders, he's hot to start the year as a defenseman, a point per game. Does he get the 9 games, or does he get sent back to Erie in the OHL? So me says that he's going to stay with the Islanders, but James Higgins still not with the Boston Bruins. Don't expect them to be there at all this year. But for Boston, they still have a whole bunch of players that make them a high floor type of team. Number 1 defenseman in Charlie McAvoy, goaltender in Jeremy Swayman, who they gave a big contract to. But there's still a lot of holes on the team. And with David Pastrnak being last year, he scored 50 more points than the next best Bruin on the team. And Brad Marchand was up there, even though he got traded and he was hurt right before the trade. And Morgan Geekie, 30-goal season for him last year, but he is he's currently not on that pace right now, but he's still, once again, another high floor player as he's on pace for somewhere in the 20s. Elias Lindholm, we saw how great he was in Calgary, especially with Matthew Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau on that line. We saw that he's not really much of a play driving type of forward, more of a defensive kind of guy there. And the Boston Bruins took on some contract, one contract in a trade from when the Edmonton Oilers were dumping Victor Arvidsson, who was a scratch for the most part in the Stanley Cup playoffs. They took his contract as a leadership role for this Boston Bruins is going through a little bit of a transition, offered big money in back-to-back years to Nikita Zadorov, who right now is playing in a third pair role with Boston. And that's a long-time commitment that they're putting there. And Tanner Jeannot, tough, hard-nosed, in-your-face, sandpaper type of player. They gave him quite a bit of money there as well. I was thinking, okay, if the Panthers sign him to a minimum contract, cool. This is the type of player that could fit with the Florida Panthers. But then when you see what the Boston Bruins offered him and what he accepted, you're thinking, wow. And then once again, it kind of shows the landscape of how things have changed in the NHL with the rise in cap there. Gonna double check what Tanner Jeannot is making real quick. 3.4 million. Yeah. So and he got term as well. His contract does not end until 2030. So 3.4 million with a no trade clause in the first 2 years. That's gonna be a little bit of a tough one, but it's movable towards the end, as I don't really see that much of a high ceiling for Tanner Jeannot there. And we know that he can get a little reckless with some of the hits that he delivers. There was one where he was with the LA Kings last year, and I think he hit Brock Besser. I believe last year it was someone on the Canucks that he hit, and he got suspended there. But hey, they maybe they found a third line center in Fraser Minton, that was a piece that they acquired in the Brandon Carlo trade. Brandon Carlo was likely not going to resign with the Boston Bruins as he was an expiring deal, and maybe trying to fill up that spot as but still the Boston Bruins are trying to figure out what they have there at center, which right now it's been tough ever since Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci retired. You're trying to fill that spot with Pavel Zacha. You tried it with Charlie Coyle at one point, who's right now with the Columbus Blue Jackets after trading him to the Colorado Avalanche just the year before. But it's a whole bunch of third line forwards playing second line minutes, but at the same time, that's what the Florida Panthers are right now. So it's a battle of two depleted rosters as well. But in this case, the Boston Bruins are not going. This is who their actual team is when healthy versus the Florida Panthers. They're missing those guys. Injury luck was not on the Bruins side last year, with Hampus Lindholm getting injured very early on in the year, and it happened again this year on opening night on the second night of the season for the Bruins in their home opener against the Chicago Blackhawks. Hampus Lindholm did return in their game against the Colorado Avalanche, but that was the first end of a back-to-back, but did not play the second end of a back-to-back in Utah. He's currently day-to-day, so that's something that to look out for when the Panthers do face the Bruins. Will he actually be back in the lineup? A big part of that top four that can protect the goaltender in Jeremy Swayman, assuming that he is going to be starting for the Boston Bruins on Tuesday, him versus Jonas Korpisalo. But it's going to be all about Brad Marchand, his return there, and I hope that the Panthers are there to play for him and that they'll help him get a win. And Brad Marchand, once again, you can't rely on a 37-year-old to get your offense going, and he needs more of that goal support around him, which right now they're drawing tougher assignments, and he's thriving through that. How much does it last? How much does it last before he goes dry? And that's why hopefully the analytical numbers that we saw from Jay Fresh, the rest of the other parts of the lineup picks up. Sam Bennett, Anton Lundell, looking at you as guys to be big contributing factors to this offense that the Panthers have just been very dry with, especially 5-on-5. 1 of 19 on the power play in this road trip, and special teams a few years ago was why they won the Stanley Cup, especially on the penalty kill. with over 90%. So what team do we see on Tuesday night when the Panthers do take on the Boston Bruins? So, so 0-5, an 0-5 road trip does not sound fun. Would not be fun to recap, and I hope that we are not doing that once we get to that on Tuesday night. So we will be here either way on Tuesday night going into Wednesday morning, as Jacob Winans will be back here on Wednesday to recap the Panthers' fifth and final game of this road trip in Boston, and then they will be right back at home before they welcome in the Pittsburgh Penguins to town, as it'll be another homestand for the Panthers. We're going to see a lot of these long homestands for the Panthers in October, November, and December. So maybe it's just we'll see that flip of the switch for the Panthers like we saw in the first 3 games of the season. But that's going to do it for today's show. Thank you, as always, for listening. And in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.